My guests today are Dr. Allison Brown and her husband Will. Allison is an author, and her latest book is called The Origin Story, Rediscovering Our Galactic Ancestors. Her husband Will Brown is a clear channel, and the two of them work together to help people discover their higher self, their origins, and their purpose. All right, Allison and Will, thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure. Good to see you again.
Oh, thank you. It's good to see you two again.
Yeah.
I wanted to have you on because I wanted to talk about what you do exactly, and really I wanted to understand a little bit, because I know I've spoken to you a little bit before about it, but it's I think it went over my head a little bit. So maybe
it can do that for some people for sure.
Yeah. So maybe we can start out by just giving a little bit of your background and how you came to where you're at now.
Sure. You want to go first?
Well, we call it our awakening story, in that it's sort of how we understand ourselves to be more than just physical, right? And so I've always been excited about and interested in, like you, extraterrestrials or craft and visitations and those types of stories as well, growing up Bermuda Triangle, and Loch Ness and just all of those things. So I've always had this affinity for this sort of subject. But as we've sort of grown in this understanding, we've come to focus a little more on the spiritual aspect, the metaphysical aspect of those things, rather than just the physical manifestations of them. And so around 2015, having been raised in a conservative Christian church, I started exploring some other things like Reiki, started working on Will with Reiki, and that unlocked a lot of his intuitive abilities that had laid dormant from childhood. Mm-hmm. And so as that developed, his psychic and mediumship started to come online. And then in 2018 is where it really kind of took off, which was when Will had a QHHT session. This is the Dolores Cannon method of hypnosis, quantum healing hypnosis technique.
Okay.
And so he had a practitioner that came over who was doing her practice work for to be qualified as a practitioner. And so she was doing 25 free sessions. She came over and put Will in a trance state, but he went way deeper than most clients. Mm-hmm. And during that session, he started channeling his primary guide, who we later found out was Enoch. And it was just sort of on speed dial since then. He's discovered that he has a collective, a team of guides that work with us. We've been channeling them since 2018 and learning a whole lot about the world that we live in and the galaxy and the universe and our role in it by talking to a lot of these beings. Yep. So that's kind of where we are now.
Yep.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot of people, all it takes is just a little bit of stimulation in that area, and then, it just opens right up.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Yep. It's like, just, I would say anything that you do in life that you find a deep interest in and you get connected to it in a certain way, whether that's art or music or whatever, there becomes a flow in it. And that's really what that is. That's that energetic connection to what you're supposed to be doing or the path that you're supposed to be on. And really nothing stops that once it really opens up. It just continues to go.
Yeah, I can relate to that because I've played music, in my life, and I know that state that you get in, with you're, able to like improvise freely and express yourself. It's that sort of, it's almost like you're channeling something anyway.
It is.
Yep, for sure.
Right.
Yep.
It exactly is.
Yep.
Well, tell me about let's get into this about the Starseed clusters and all that. That's just the whole thing. I need to get started here because I'm gonna have a lot of questions, I imagine.
Sure.
Right. So when we first met, William, three of us, we had been invited to speak at your UFO fest, and I think that was about 1.5 years ago in June. And one of the things that I guess it'll be 2 years in June. One of the things that we wanted to bring to the audience was this understanding of, yes, the visitations and yes, the hard evidence is really great, but there's so much more to it. And why are they visiting us? And why are they showing themselves? And why are we seeing so many craft in the sky? And so we wanted to bring that spiritual understanding of it. And so we presented the information that we had brought forth in the origin story, Rediscovering Our Galactic Ancestors. That's the book that we had written just shortly before we came to speak to your group at the conference. And so in that, it's a completely channeled work, and it's channeled by the 12 galactic groups or starseed clusters that have founded our galaxy. And in that book, they really wanted to spread this message of love, and that humanity was created with love in mind and love at our core, and that we are a compilation of all 12 of those galactic races. Our DNA holds that, all 12 of them, and we're unique in that way, because any other creature or being or extraterrestrial that you're going to come in contact with is limited in that way. They only have certain strands of any of those 12, but we hold all 12. We are a repository of information, and that's what makes humanity so special. And that is also why, as I explained to your to the conference participants, is that's why we have what we call abductions, visitations, that sort of thing. Where they seem to be studying us, because if they need a strand of our DNA or they need some information from us, we're the only ones that can give that to them. And so, it all started with this this ping from the 12, wanting to get this information out through us, and that's kind of where it all started.
Yeah, I was interested to ask you, before we get too deep into it, how you felt about the physical aspect of the phenomenon, about physical craft, and about abduction phenomena and stuff and things like that. That is a part of that. So you agree that that's a part of it, and that you're you're just dealing with the more important issue, that's the spiritual side of it.
And I don't know that I would even call it more important.
Right. It's part of the whole bigger picture. I mean, we interact with a lot of individuals who've had sightings or have had interactions with either beings or craft. We've done sessions with them, and their higher selves, or even the beings that they connect with, whatever race they might be, they always have a message for that individual, or even for humanity, that there's a bigger picture of why they're making their presence known, the craft are here, or the beings are here. And it's really this I hate to use the term, but it's been, it's kind of been overused, but this coexistence. It's this coming together of humanity and our origins. And it's reintroducing that into the conversation. And we've had a lot of people that have had sessions, but had experiences with extraterrestrials that were frankly frightening or disturbing to them, but they find out through that session that that's your human response to what was taking place. Really, the bigger picture is why you're connecting, and that goes back through a series of plans or events in your contract. Why you do this? You might be doing this from lifetime to lifetime. So there's a number of different avenues that we explore with individuals.
But we definitely take physical seriously.
Yes.
And we understand that not only can it be enlightening and exciting, it can be traumatic. And so one of the messages we try to get across to people is that most times, I would never say never, but most times it's not meant to be traumatic. It's just when you're dealing with races who don't have emotion, for example, and they don't understand fear, they don't understand why you would be afraid when they come to visit, they can't mitigate that for us.
Right.
The other thing is that almost always, again, there's some sort of, like Will said, connection in your contract to be of service to those beings in whatever way, or to get messages out for them, or whatever the reason. And so when they can have a session with us, for example, or a hypnosis session, or explore these reasons why they were selected or why they're having these sightings, it can be much more comforting and reassuring, and they can move forward feeling safe about it.
So the beings that you channel, are those physical beings somewhere? Or like, do they exist somewhere in a physical form, or are those beings are like some sort of interdimensional?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Both.
And
yeah, I mean, one of the beings that I've frequently channeled, and it's one that's been connected with me throughout my life, are the little zetas, right? There's one particular one that I have you would describe it as a parallel existence as one of these zetas.
Mm-hmm.
I look at him as my technical advisor. Anytime I need any technical advice, if I'm working on an engine or working on some sort of electronic equipment or whatever, and I don't understand what's going on, I'll sit with it and I'll send it up to him. Basically before I go to bed, I'm like, all right, let me know what I need to do. And throughout the night, it's kind of like the Matrix. I get plugged in, I get a download, and I get the clarity of what I need to fix or where I need to investigate further. Yeah. And so we've figured that out through channeling, that I have this connection as that. So he's a physical being on a craft that's out in our, just outside of our atmosphere. And he's, kind of circling the planet, if you want to call it that. Okay. Yeah. But others, we've talked to 12th dimensional, 11th dimensional beings. Those are just purely energetic beings, in the different races. So it kind of spans the gambit of all of them. So,
and that was the other thing that it's important to share, is that our universe and what we understand of reality consists of 12 dimensions. We are currently in the 3rd and 4th dimension for the most part. Some people have already ascended into the 5th dimension, and all it is more, it's not like we're going up or we're better or anything like that. It's more of an expansive awareness. So as you move up in dimensionality, you have a greater awareness of what reality is. And so it tends to be in the 4th, 5th, 6th dimension where you're going to see physical beings, because it's the denser of the vibrational hierarchy there. Anything above that in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and on up, they're going to be in a vibrational state only, frequency. And so you can experience them. You might see a mirage type of thing in your bedroom, for example, or you might feel a way in your body when they're visiting you. And so they don't have a need, though, for a body, but they can scale down their vibrations such that they can come into physicality for us if we request that, but they can't hold that state for very long.
Right. Okay. So, yeah. I've heard, I've heard other people say that there are certain beings, like sometimes people talk about the mantis, where they're really not that's not their true form, but they take that form, because.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. And I asked about that early on. I'm like, why, when people talk about a Lyran, for example, from Lyra, why do they look like a lion? And it's because in physicality, humans have to have a construct to wrap their mind around something, an image. And so that is evidently what whenever these beings would visit or come close to a human, that was what most of the time they were looking like. And so it's just become now commonplace for them to look like that. Same with the mantis. We communicate with them quite frequently too.
So in the history of us, as human beings, how did we get pieces of all these different, in our DNA, right? What you're saying. So why are we not just one thing?
Right.
Well, as we've described in the origin story, the purpose of this galaxy was for the creation of a human being, for the race of humans. That was the purpose. That was why the galaxy was formed. And the 12 were called in for this project. Then there was, and again, I want to say up front too, this is our understanding. There are multiple different perspectives and reality points. And if it resonates with your viewers, great. If not, it's okay. Just let it go. But this is what we understand from what we have learned over time.
Yeah, well, none of us knows it all. We're just all doing our own interpretation of what we see.
Right. And so what happened is the frequencies started combining in various ways, and hybridization was taking place. The ultimate goal being, though, the creation of a human being. And so it was always purposeful design from the beginning. And so they knew that they were going to create a human that had all 12 strands. So we understand that we have 2 strands of physical DNA. We have 12 strands of energetic DNA. And that's why, because we have one for each of them. So when you come into this body, you contract with 2 of those 12 that will inform you throughout most of your life. They will be the ones that most closely work with you, but you have access to all of them because you can tune on or off those other aspects of your DNA.
Yep.
So, my only experience as far as the only real knowledge about channeling is from people like the people who channel like Bashar or Ramtha, something like that. So I'm not super knowledgeable about that. So what is your process?
Yeah.
And also what if I know you guys do one-on-one sessions with people.
Yep.
So what is your process, and then what would that process look like for someone who was doing a session with you typically?
Yeah. So my channeling process has, shifted from the very first experience to now. I mean, just like anything, any profession or anybody that's, doing something for a while, it progresses and it becomes more natural. So that's kind of where I'm at. So, initially started with somebody putting me into a hypnosis state by reading a script and allowing me to follow the path, kind of like a guided meditation. And at some point you find yourself, in that deep meditative state, slide over an edge to where you go into the trance state. Now, for me, it was a very deep space, and I call it my 0 point because people have asked me over and over, where do you find yourself when you're channeling? What does it look like where you're channeling? And it's nothingness. It's nothingness, but purity and all in the same. It's the expanse of everything. So when the process of trance sets in, it's like a light switch. Everything goes out, my consciousness steps aside, and just my physicality is here, and then whoever needs to speak is speaking through me. So for many trance channelers, it's very similar. But over time, I didn't need to be induced. My team, or the group that I channel, they showed me a process of doing some deep breathing, and through that deep breathing, bringing them in that way. And even now, I don't do so much of the deep breathing, but I just recognize that they're there, or your higher self, or whatever I'm about to channel, whatever energy that might be, whether it's a pet or a galactic being or an angelic being or a tree or a fish or whatever it might be. It's there. I feel that energy and I connect to it. I step aside, my consciousness steps aside, and that energy form steps in, and then I channel the information. Now, as far as working with others, it's, the process is kind of like what I just described. Somebody will sign up for a session, and they will communicate through Allison the entire time, because I try to keep myself completely clear of any details of that individual, or that's what that upcoming session is. So I try to keep myself clear of, other than the person's name. I just want to know the person's name. So that's my point of focus when I set my space before the session begins. And when the session begins, when they get on Zoom or they're here in person, I'll ask them to do a little bit of breathing, and I'll just begin to sense into the energy. And that's, again, where the light switch action takes place. My consciousness steps aside. Their higher self will come through. And for the next hour, all the questions that they've sent to Allison will be asked to me, or to their higher self through me, and I'll respond as their higher self. So because it's their higher self energy that's present, and it's been very, very profound. We've done sessions from people all around the world, and it's been extremely exciting to do them, and get to see the result of those sessions.
So you'd not had any experience with meditation or lucid dreaming, anything like that before you started doing that?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess you could say that Allison alluded to this aspect of my childhood. I had some out of body experiences through guided meditation when I was in high school. And I kind of locked that away as far as a tool that I would use in my military career whenever it was a super stressful situation. I could tap into that. I wouldn't go completely out of body, but I could separate from the chaos. When it was a chaotic situation, I could separate from that chaos and be in a more mindful state and have clear focus and clear focus on what was needing to be done. So yes, that aspect of it. And through Reiki and through the different, I'll say, spiritual practices that I took on before the channeling, that it was all leading up to. It's similar. I'm sure as a musician, you didn't start out jamming out. You didn't have that flow right away. You had to. There were steps along the way. There were things you needed to do along the way to kind of refine the craft, and that's exactly what it is. It's the little steps you take to refine the craft. And I dabbled with mediumship and psychic work for quite a while, and I just didn't feel it was the fit. But when that channeling began, I knew this is really why I'm here. This is my calling. And in 2018, that's when I set aside the psychic or medium work. Do I still do it? I don't do it quote unquote professionally, but if I'm with someone and I do get a psychic impression, I might mention it to them, or I might do what another term that you might have heard is conscious channeling. It's not the deep process that I go through, but it's more of this lucid, conscious stream of information that comes in, and that happens frequently as well. So,
yeah, I was just wondering about the experience from your end a little bit, because personally, I have, I've meditated for a long time, like 30 some years, and
yeah.
And so I'm familiar with that, state that you were talking about as being it's like the void state,
Right.
where there's just nothing, like this sort of Zen nothingness state.
Yeah.
And I could see how you could easily step from there to something like that, but,
Yeah.
but I was just, I was wondering how it felt to you, and how you tuned into someone else's higher self, like you were talking about.
Yeah. Well, let me just address that right quick, and that, because that's a good question, because a lot of people ask that is how can you go from this to that? How can you go from say channeling an animal to channeling a galactic being? Well, what we found out early on in the kind of the early sessions of channeling was Allison would ask, well, how does William, is he going to be just channeling this group of beings and the collective, that's who I channel, came through and said, no, he's an open channel. So wherever the frequency is pointed, that's what he'll connect to. So I liken it to like the old radio on the old Chevy, and you dial it or push the button to a certain channel. It's like that. Your higher self holds a certain frequency. Through your name, I connect to that frequency. So before the session starts, I come up here and I have a little invocation that I do. I draw upon your name. I call it in. I'm already setting the frequency that I'm going to be connecting to. So when you sit in front of me, then when we start the session, I'm already familiar with that. And I just use that focus point of the nothingness to enter into that. It's like finding that, fine-tuning that dial right to that frequency. And that's where it connects. And that's for anything that they'll end up channeling.
And all humans are antennas. And so we're all connected to that divine source of inspiration, whether we realize it or not. And you as a musician, as you said, when you get into that flow state, or we're in a flow state when we're driving down the road and we get into what we call a light trance state, and you don't remember passing those landmarks on your way home because your mind is elsewhere. That's when inspiration comes in, new ideas. I guess if you have a concern, you might have a decision that pops in. But we're all antennas. And so Will just happens to be an antenna that sort of scans a variety of frequencies and can lock in to whatever one he wants to. But all of us do this. You channel. Mine doesn't look like his. When I write books. And when I write, I'll sit with an intention and I'll just start writing or typing. And when I get done, it's almost like 2 or 3 hours just flew by, and I have this stuff on the page that I don't really recall coming up with or editing. And so I'll read through it, and it sometimes brings me to tears, and I'm like, that wasn't me. That was inspired. I like to call it inspired writing, or intuitive writing.
That's its own form of channeling, really,
Right, but we want people to understand that they all can do this in some way, whether it's cooking or gardening or music. Or whatever.
It's truly when you get into that state where really time disappears. That's a form of channeling. When you're separating yourself from the reality that you're currently in. You're not head focused, you're spiritually focused. So, and when I say spiritually, that doesn't mean you're, thinking about Zen or some sort of spiritual form of activity. It just means that you're in another reality point that's in the current form. Like Allison says, cooking, that's my favorite thing to do. And I've had spontaneous channeling happen while I'm cooking, because I'm getting into that flow and nothing exists other than that moment that I'm in, and time doesn't exist. And something will start coming through because Allison is having this other conversation somewhere else, with somebody else. And I'll go, oh, wait a minute, that's something that triggered. And this flow of consciousness comes through. So,
yeah, I feel like we're all, I guess I'm sort of the belief that's not as uncommon as it used to be, that we're all really just aspects of the one,
Yes,
correct.
And then so therefore it's not surprising to me that you can tune into other aspects of that one,
Exactly.
You got it. Yep.
Yep. But so Allison, when a person comes to you and they talk to you, they communicate with you, and they're communicating. Are they communicating like questions to you that they want answered about their life, or are they asking for general guidance and things like that? And then when Will comes into the picture, are you asking him the questions and they're not speaking, or are they?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct. One of the reasons that we do it that way is because we want the client to just relax into the session. And if your left brain is activated trying to think of the next question or trying to interpret what they're saying so that you can ask the next question, you're not focused on the energy, and you're not going to get as good of a session as if you just let me do the heavy lifting. So I've done this so many times, and I also use my own intuition and my knowledge of how they answer questions and how to ask the proper questions to elicit the response that you need. And so when I ask a client before the session, the day before, to send me their top list of questions in order of importance, then I get an idea of where they want to go and what they're looking for. And so that way I can ask appropriate follow-up questions or ask the right being. Sometimes we might want to call in their galactic family or a guide or an ancestor or somebody else to inform the session. And the other reason that I handle all of that, number one, he wants to remain clueless about what's happening so that it reassures the client that his left brain, that his mind is not answering the question.
Right.
Because he doesn't even know what the questions are. And when we come out, he doesn't have any idea what was said. But also because it takes a great deal of trust and surrender for him to be in a space where he has no idea what his physical body is doing or what's coming out of his mouth. And so it took him years to trust the process and to trust his guides. And if it weren't for me being there to be sort of a protector or to make sure that the questions are appropriate, if he did this with a client and they're asking all kind of crazy, inappropriate stuff, it wouldn't work. And so we've kind of come up with this team, and we understand that that's why we came in together to do this work. And it's so rewarding.
Yeah. And I would say that many of the times, because typically what happens as soon as I go in, there's an opening message from their higher self to them. And that opening message encapsulates one, if not more than one of the questions within the questions that they've already, or what the client has brought forward to Allison. So, this is again why I don't want to know, but their higher self, when I'm connected to it, they know what needs to be heard. And they give this opening statement that kind of sums up to maybe one or two or three of the questions within the list of questions.
Well, could you tell me a little bit about the, maybe we can get into a little of the details of the nuts and bolts about the clusters and stuff, like I don't really understand that. Like, what are we, what is that?
So we all have this idea. We have this idea about source, right? Okay. So we have a source, but we're talking about infinity. We're talking about existence that has always been and that will always be. And so when you talk about source, there isn't just one source. There's a source above our source and then another source on into infinity. So the way that it's described in the origin story, there was this call to create a galaxy, a universe. I say universe because we have the Andromedan galaxy as well as the Milky Way. And they explain why the Andromedan galaxy split. But there was this call for physicality because we're unique in that we're the only universe that has physicality in this way. Everything else is energetic. And so, yes, you can, when you're in that energetic state, you can envision an apple, but it's not the same thing as having an apple in your hand and taking a bite of it, right? So there's something to be said about physicality. So this call went out to these 12 clusters who came from outside of our universe to come in and create this boundary of a universe and to start creating, because really source is simply a creation. It's a creation. The Elohim, whether you call it the Elohim or Sophia or God or whatever you call it, it's a creator being. It's a creator energy, right? So it's creating physicality, and it's coming together. And so a lot of people understand themselves as a starseed, and that's what we mean when we say a starseed. It means that you understand that you're not just a human being in a physical body. You understand that your origins are from outside of Earth. And so a lot of people will connect with the common ones like Pleiadians, Lyrians, Arcturians, There are Martians and Draconians, which get a bad rap. The Andromedans, all of those.
I still don't trust the Draconians. I don't know.
Right.
Heard too many bad things about them.
And trust me, I was curious too. And so I asked those questions in the book. So if you're curious, grab a copy of the book and you'll understand that just like humanity, it's not all good or bad. There has to be balance. So you cannot have one without the other. Right. And so we understand a lot about that. But that's what the starseeds simply mean, is that they have this connection to one of those 12.
Right. And the clusters, like going back to the point about the clusters, as it explains in the book, there was nothing, but through vibration, it began to come forth and bring matter,
cluster,
right? Or cluster. So that's where these different source clusters began, Lyran cluster. And
is it like there was the one, and then that became two, and then so on and so forth, and then there's a sort of a hierarchy, like in a Neoplatonic kind of sense of the hierarchy? Or
I wouldn't call it a hierarchy. No. It's certainly not a hierarchy in that 12 is better than 11, better than 8. It's not like that at all. It's just a different perspective. So if you're in the 12th dimension, you're going to have a higher perspective than somebody in the 3rd dimension. You just are, because it's more expansive is the word, really. It's It expands this way. It's not a hierarchy like this, right?
Okay.
And so the 12 clusters were the original source points, essentially. Source created those 12 on an equal plane, each of them to hold a particular aspect. And we describe that in each of those chapters in the book about what their specialty is. For example, the Lyrans are very heart-centered. The Arcturians and the Pleiadians work together because they're technological and healing focused. And so they all have these different aspects and characteristics. And so you can tune into any of them depending upon what it is that you're doing. If you want to create some healing technology, you might call in the Arcturians to help you with that. The Arcturians are working with a lot of humans to create this consciousness mechanism that we will all hold, that will tune our bodies into a 5th dimensional state of healing. And so that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, the biofield, or the energetic biofield of a human, to hold it at a higher frequency to keep healing, or create a state of healing that's more profound, and especially as we ascend into the 5th dimension.
And so to your point, the 12 clusters are the original source energies, the pure source energies. From that point, they started mingling with each other and creating hybrid types of beings. So if you talk to a Lyran now, you might be talking to a Lyran that's in an 8th dimensional state or a 9th dimensional state. We often try to go to the highest dimensional state just to get the more pure aspect of that information. The same way that when the Bible was channeled, for example, it's coming through a human being. And so if you can channel it straight from the source point, all of those religions are the same at that source point, right? They have the same foundational source. But when it starts, like in the communication game where you whisper to somebody and then to another person, it gets diluted and diluted. And that's what happens as it comes down the dimensional fields.
Yeah, once it's filtered through so many different.
Right.
So with the like, what would that tell me? Like, if I knew about which ones that is that what I descended from, or because what I'm thinking is, are you familiar with the a lot of the theosophical based sort of like they're in the 1950s with the contactee movement, there became a lot of these sort of new religious movements, like Unarius or Aetherius Society, and then even later up into the Raelians and stuff. But in a lot of those, they kind of go off of a very similar story, and even Scientology does. A very similar story that just really encompassed, in a nutshell, was that human beings originated on Mars, and then they messed Mars up because of some sort of nuclear disaster or something like that.
Yep.
And then human beings were allowed to reincarnate, or to become physical beings again on this planet, with this sort of like contract with the galactic. I don't know what some people call it, galactic council or federation or something like that. Like they that was sort of the agreement is that we can exist again on this planet and try to reach our full potential with the as long as we don't blow this planet up, basically.
Right.
Yeah, they're not going to let that happen.
Yeah, you heard that a lot from a lot of people who had contact in the 50s, that would have contact with like the the Nordic beings and stuff. You'd hear that story a lot from them. So is that something that
I think you bring
up what you're talking about?
You bring up a really good point, because our daughter jokes and she's like, Dad, you know how easy it'd be for you to create a cult? Because when you bring this information through, people resonate with it.
Yeah.
Not everybody, but some people resonate with it. And then they look to this person who's channeling or that's bringing the information. In all of those, you'll see the same thing. It was Jesus was the one for Christianity.
Right.
So you resonate with this, and then you create this religion. That's not the point of it at all.
No.
But that's what people tend to do. That's what humans tend to do, right? So they run off and they create all of these based on the followers of that of that information. And so the way we understand it, you're accurate. And they, what happens also is they give just enough truthful information that people resonate, but then they start putting their human spin on it, and you have all of these wacky rules.
The ego steps in, right?
Yeah, these crazy rules, or you have to do this or that to stay in the group, whatever it is. It's kind of nuts.
And once it's removed from the original person, then once you get like a couple of people removed down the line, then it's like it's whatever they want it to be, and then just people are self-serving in that way, I guess. But try to keep it as pure as possible as it seems to be like.
Exactly.
So what I would say is when people are channeling this information, you use your own discernment to resonate with it. And how do you know? It's because they're not taking away your power by saying you have to join our group or do these things or jump through these hoops. They're giving the power to you and telling you how to access that in your own heart. Right. How can I access this information myself? How can I connect with my own higher self and be the best person that I can be? Not how can I follow you to tell me what's going on? So using your discernment is so important for your viewers to understand. If it resonates, it lights you up, it feels good, it feels expansive in your heart, then go with it. As you learn and grow, that person or that channeler may not resonate anymore, or maybe you've learned all you could, and so you start following someone else. That's called growth and evolution, and that's normal. Yeah. But you brought up a good point. I do want to mention Mars.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't know how far you want to go with the whole Mars thing.
I do want to tell you what we understand about that story.
Right,
it is
because
I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, we've just learned a little bit more because we've just recently came back from a trip to Egypt, and we have a lot of interesting experiences there, and some of which Allison brought back questions as far as the different dynasties and the different pharaohs and kings, how they align up to this whole galactic piece. So I'll let you I think that's where it threads in here really nicely. So,
it was accurate that humanity started, what would become the true humans started on Mars, and the Martians were in charge of sort of our development and helping us understand how to live in community and do all of that. Yes, at that time there were galactic wars happening. There was a nuclear peace. It wasn't just because of a nuclear explosion. You can read more about that. In fact, Brian Corey Dobbs, who also spoke at that same conference where we met you,
I'm going to have him on too.
Good. He's doing that research, and so I'll let him speak to what happened in Mars. He and I, we've channeled that. But at any rate, at some point they had to evacuate Mars, and so they literally created a portal to Earth. Earth was supposed to just be an incubator, experimental planet. But at the time of the Galactic War, the axis was tilted such that Mars could no longer support life. Earth could now. And so they created a portal, brought the humans that were in existence to Earth, where we continued to develop and evolve on our own. But to that degree, when we were in Egypt, and I just could not wrap my mind around why some of the earlier dynasties, when you look at the hieroglyphs, they have these odd-shaped heads or hats or all of those things. And so there's a lot of
facial features were much different than the later dynasties and so on.
Right. So there was a lot of speculation as to whether they were actual extraterrestrials. So I finally, in channel just a week ago or so, wanted some clarity on that. And what we were told is that the earliest dynasties, yes, were the people that were put in charge, if you wanted to call them pharaohs or what have you, they were completely galactic. Because when we first got to Earth, we had to have some people in governance, not meaning govern over like we understand governance now, but governance
or guidance, or rather,
exactly.
Better
and
term,
because
yep.
they were higher dimensional, they were looked upon as gods, and they were put in that position. So the first dynasties were completely extraterrestrial in charge. The middle dynasties, it started to become a hybrid ET human, and then by the end, the later dynasties were just human kings and pharaohs and things like that. So that cleared up something that had been in my mind for a long time.
Yeah.
How about those structures underneath the pyramid? Have you got any information there?
Well, I that's the one, people have been asking me, well, what's the biggest takeaway? And you would think it would be some great spiritual experience. And we had plenty of great spiritual experiences. But for me, growing up watching, Ancient Aliens and the different, these different shows, and you get a perspective in your head of what this should look like. Well, when you're actually there and you actually get to step foot in, say, the Great Pyramid, or for us, the first pyramid we went to was in Hararo, which is south of Cairo, and it's a little known area. It's getting a little bit more attention, but this is a first dynasty pyramid, and when you arrive, you see this, I'll say, just eroded mound of dirt, and it's because the blocks, they're not blocks, they're bricks about the size of a cinder block made out of mud and clay and thatch, and that's the pyramid that was built there with that. But we had access to go into the pyramid, maybe about 50 feet or so, and what you notice, what's below ground, are those giant megalithic blocks. The building construction is not the same as what it was built above, so there's two different disconnected points of building style. And so that to me was the biggest thing. Even within the Great Pyramid, the exterior of the Great Pyramid, yes, giant blocks, but they're not uniform. They're just stacked on top of one another. But when you go in and you are ascending to the King's Chamber, you see these huge megalithic blocks. So there's an internal construction that is different than the exterior construction. And we know this through the origin story book, that through the builders and constructors, that much of that was put in place well before humanity showed up to create the environment of Earth so it could sustain life. And these were mechanisms, and yes, those structures beneath that are now being scanned, those are all part of the, I call it the mechanism, right? That it had some sort of function. It wasn't a burial tomb, it was a functional piece of equipment to help to sustain the
frequency
planet.
generator.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
That's what I was going to say. Do you think it was, some sort of power source or
Sure,
some sort
yes.
of,
Absolutely.
Because my impression of what I thought the King's Chamber was going to look like was it was going to be this large room. There was going to be hieroglyphs. There was going to be all this stuff. No, it's this giant granite box with another granite box in it as a sarcophagus, if you want to call it that. But if you look at it from a I'll say a portal standpoint, that box probably at some point contained, maybe a crystal or some sort of fluid that amplified the energy in the space, because not only did myself, Allison, and several other people have very strong energetic connections at certain points within the King's Chamber, there's just a feel of that, of being something more than just some place you're going to bury somebody, right? You're going to put somebody to rest.
And it was used in that way later. I mean, they repurposed all of those structures.
Right.
Yeah.
Not to say that history as we know it is
wrong.
Incorrect.
Right.
It's just that history is way
Right.
older. Way older.
I liken it to, you build a house, in that beautiful house that we're in. If we decide to move, somebody else is going to come in and change the color of the walls, change the wallpaper, maybe tear out a cabinet here and there, change a room around. It's the same thing, I mean, it's the
repurposed
purpose.
or
right, exactly.
And sometimes things, I was just watching a thing earlier, and it was about stone circles, in Europe, and how, like, the original stone circles from the Stone Age, that those were the ones that, like, the really big ones that you see in like Orkney or the Shetland Islands and places like that. Like, they were later ones that were built that were just imitating that, it wasn't that they were, and those people, the people that built those later ones, like around the Viking age and 800 or so, they really didn't know the purpose of the original ones, so they were trying to kind of like dial into that, but they didn't really know exactly, they didn't know as much as we know now about that past,
Yeah.
And I will say a lot of the structures that are on Earth, and Brian will confirm this too when you talk to him, but that's what they're finding now on Mars, because they recreated a lot of those same structures here on Earth in homage or imitation to what was already on Mars.
Yep.
Yeah, I've long been fascinated with Mars and the pyramids and the all those things in the Cydonia region and the face on Mars that they've tried to debunk a million times, stuff like that.
It's just a bunch of rocks stacked a certain way to give you a shadow. Yeah,
just a coincidence.
And then there's a lot of questions about the moon, also. Very much how it resonates like a bell when strange things like that. So when you were in the King's Chamber, did you get to have any? Were you in there with a bunch of people, or did you get to have any moments where you were just kind of in there alone? Or
we did have some semi-private time. We did not. It's very expensive to purchase alone time.
Oh yeah, I would say.
But a little money correctly bribed goes a long way. So we managed to get some semi-private time up there for our group.
Yeah.
And it was just, like he said, it was just so mind-boggling and so quick everything was happening that we didn't even get good pictures. It was just...
That's the only place I didn't really take pictures because I was so connected into an energy force that, really just took me out of my body. It was just an amazing experience.
The guide that was up there placed Will and I on either end of the sarcophagus, perfectly aligned to a particular place on the wall. He knew what he was doing. And then he placed another of our group right in the center
of the room. Yep.
And he was aligning us. And what we understood later after we channeled when we got home is that he was lining us up to two portals so that we could hold open this gateway to the all so that our whole group could have their own experience, which they did.
Yeah.
And the girl that was in the middle, she felt this huge stream of light coming in because in the King's Chamber, the energy is such that if you know how to travel out of body, you can go wherever you want. It's basically an open door, an open portal to the all.
Stargate, if you want to call it that.
To do that, and your body is prepared. And so another friend of ours, Dr. Roach, who we interviewed for our podcast, and we compared notes. He literally has no recollection of being in the King's Chamber, even though they were there 20 minutes and then they left because he literally went out of body and doesn't recall a thing. Yeah. So it's a fascinating place. We had a marvelous experience there.
We were able to secure an hour's worth of time at the feet of the Sphinx, and we at 6 o'clock in the morning one morning and spent about 35 minutes or so doing channeling, a guided meditation, and then a Lyran came in and actually gave a connection point or a transmission, and it was just one of those surreal moments where just as the channeling experience began, the call to prayer started to happen. There were some dogs barking in the background, and it was dark, and it was just very surreal, but so empowering and so powerful energetically. It was just absolutely amazing.
There were 10 in our group, and it was, as you mentioned about the raw law of one material. They were likening our group. 10 is one. 2026 is a 1 year, so we're starting this new evolution, right? And that 10 in our group was purposeful, and it was just so profound that we knew while we were there that we were going to come back. So we are planning to take another group in December.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's it's been on my bucket list for a long time. I've just never made it there, but I would imagine so. Even people who are complete materialists, people like that still have powerful experiences there. So I can imagine if you were open to it to some degree, at least, then it would be much more amplified.
It is. It's very rewarding. The guides that communicated to us while we were there explained that this is the birthplace of humanity. This is where it all began. And
that
so
whole region,
we kind of consider it a pilgrimage at this point. And I think it's really important for all humans to consider taking a pilgrimage to that area, Egypt or one of the other countries in that area, because you're getting your feet on the ground of where incarnations began.
And you say like a materialist, just that person that's just in the 3D. It's the guy that goes to work every day and he comes home. I'm telling you, the moment you step out of the van and you're on the Giza plateau and you're looking at all three of those pyramids, your jaw's going to hit the floor because it's just so much to take into to process. We were there for 6 days. By day 3, my brain was overloaded with the amount of information and the amount of visual stimuli of everything that we were seeing, and we still had 3 days to go. So
can you imagine seeing them in their glory with their white marble and the and the gold caps and stuff on them? That's insane.
And they're huge. There's also some contemplation about how large human beings or the giants were, and were the giants extraterrestrial or human or what have you. We have our own theory about that, but at Luxor, particularly at Luxor Temple, when you walk in, these figures are just enormous, and you have to wonder who walked these halls like in its heyday. It's just incredible.
It's not because all that gargantuan and architecture and all that stuff, it's not it wasn't necessary, it wasn't it's not it's not practical just to they went beyond that to some degree, like to where
and I even asked our tour guide, because he had mentioned early on in the like one of the first couple of days something about giants. He mentioned giants. He didn't go into it, but mentioned it kind of in passing. When we arrived at Karnak, and that's a huge temple, it's you talk about these giant pillars and this colonnade of pillars, and they're 50-60 foot high, and they're just lined up. And I'm like, and I looked at him, I said, giants, right? And he goes, no. And I thought, no, I'm going with giants, because there's no way 6 foot for me, and I'm sure they were much shorter than me, building all this doesn't make sense for them. It doesn't. I mean, so
it's definitely mind-boggling.
It is.
I wanted to ask you all about Reiki healing also, and then there was the other modality that I can't remember the name of right now. It was quantum. What was it?
Quantum healing hypnosis technique, and the other one is BQH, beyond quantum healing. They're kind of
That's what I was thinking about.
Right, beyond quantum healing is also hypnosis, and it's just sort of an evolution of QHHT.
As far as Reiki, for those, the simplest way I'll put it, and I'll put it as we do, because we do a lot of work with veterans. It's really a state of relaxation, calming the body. It's a Japanese technique of stress reduction and relaxation. And there's a formal process of laying hands or just hands above the body in certain positions on the energy centers and throughout the body to bring the body into a very relaxed state. And that's really the main purpose in it. And because what we know and what we understand is, if your body is in the optimal relaxed state or de-stressed state, your body can actually start repairing itself. It can start healing itself. So that's the whole reason behind, any of these modalities like Reiki, to bring the body into the most relaxed state to help it repair any injury or any issue that might be there. And so, so it's just, there's a process of that. We're both Reiki master teachers, so we train that as well. So there's different levels: level 1, level 2, level 3, and then master teacher. So, there's different levels, but I encourage everyone to at least go get a session. And more than likely the practitioners are going to have some information for you on the other side of the session, because they'll get some sort of psychic impression or some sort of energetic impression. And, even though it's not technically the process of Reiki, but it is in the process of Reiki.
But when you come into energetic connection with another human being, and that can be in a conversation, or it can be in a massage, or it can be in a Reiki session, when you're energetically close like that, your fields are mingling. And so for the Reiki practitioners who are sensitive to that sort of thing, they may have a vision or an understanding or a visitation from an ancestor to help you or whatever. Don't expect that. That's not necessarily what Reiki is, but that's the neat thing about becoming Reiki trained, is because we kind of call it a gateway to all things metaphysical, because it also attunes you. It opens up your channel of this information as well.
Right.
And what was the other one? BHQ?
The BQH. It's just another method to induce someone into a hypnotic trance state. If somebody wanted to be a practitioner, going to get a session, I think, is super helpful. the thing is, and we do this, but we also do channeling. And so there are two ways to get information. Will can channel your higher self. And so it's you giving yourself information through Will's voice, or in a hypnosis session, it's you giving yourself information through your own voice.
Right.
But the thing is, a lot of people get into their brain, or if they're not good meditators, or they are afraid that they're not going to be able to relax, or they can't bring anything. So it can be a mind game trying to get into a relaxed enough state to bring forth the information. And we tend to doubt ourselves. So you might start speaking and then you're like, why am I saying that? That sounds so dumb. Or you think you made it up or whatever. Yeah. And so sometimes it's a little more difficult. Just depends on you as a client and you know, how you feel about left brain versus right brain access.
Yep.
Okay. Well, the book is called Origin Story. And you also have a companion book that's like a workbook that people can kind of work through also that goes with it.
Yep, goes chapter by chapter. Within the origin story itself, each chapter has a specific energetic sigil that was energetically channeled through a friend of ours. And then within the workbook, there's the same sigil, but also a follow-on sigil to meditate, kind of meditate by. There's a meditation at the end of the each, I'll say, module or chapter in that workbook as you work your way through it. So there's a lot of energy already infused in the book that way through the sigils, but it also helps you reflect upon the chapter that you just read in the book by the questions that are asked and the kind of solicit some deeper thought.
And it can be done individually, and it's helpful because it's a lot of information in that book, and some of it goes
kind of dense.
Sometimes it goes over someone's head because it's just overwhelming. So it's helpful to either do it individually with the workbook, or you can gather a group of people and sort of all go through it together. But we use that workbook whenever we teach the 12-week class ourselves.
And I'll say that because the information can be a bit dense. I found it even for myself, the very first class that we put on, the very first year that we put on the class. And that was really honestly the first time that I've actually read through all the information, even though I channeled it. And like Allison alluded to earlier, I don't remember any of that channeled information. So I don't go back and listen to it. I don't go back and reflect on it or do any of that. I know that's there. I just don't do that. It isn't my process. But I had to go back and read those chapters each week. There were some chapters I honestly couldn't read. They didn't make sense. It didn't process right. So I just set that chapter aside because I knew I wasn't ready to really read the words. And so I tell anybody that picks up the book, as they're reading along, if you get into a chapter and it just, you kind of stumble, set it aside, move on to the next chapter. Yeah. You're not quite there yet to absorb all of that information. And it makes it easy because you're not forcing yourself then to really kind of dig into it. Because
sometimes with anything like that, in in metaphysical type of things or spiritual type of things, it's where you're at in your life, and sometimes if you're at the right place at the right time, then it'll resonate with you. But if not, then you'll just pass
that's
right
exactly
by you.
right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yep.
And in addition, you guys offer Reiki sessions and in person and on Zoom, and you also have. You can do channeling on Zoom as well, you said?
We don't do Reiki sessions too much anymore, and not via Zoom. Some people can do long distance via Zoom. We choose not to, but we do teach those sessions, and we teach people how to become a Reiki practitioner, but we do that in person.
Yeah.
But via Zoom, absolutely, you can have your pet channeled. You can have your higher self channeled. You can get a galactic reading. We also started doing birth time readings because so many people want an astrological birth chart and they don't know their accurate birth time. So we can do that now as well. We can do a mini session that just tells you who your two galactic connections are, or we can do a longer session where you can communicate with them for 30 minutes. So a whole bunch of different things. They're all outlined on our website, palmandlotus.com. And that's where you can find out about our next Egypt trip as well.
All right. Well, I thank you for being here today. It was very enlightening for me, and I've learned a lot. And
absolutely.
And I appreciate it.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure to be with you.